So all my exes. I have obsessed about this for a long time. My team are sick of me talking about it. I think they're pretty happy that finally I've got a podium and a venue where I can talk about all my exes. I think a lot of it comes for me from an incredible confusion that's sitting in the market at the moment. And some of it also comes from the fact that there's a lot of mergers that you're seeing in the market where you've got consulting firms merging with design firms merging with technology businesses, and finally, technology and marketing merging. And so there's a lot of language that we had that's shared, or a lot of terminology that we have that's shared. But the problem is that also means there's a lot of confusion. So let's start with the story, my first love. In 2001, I bought my first laptop. And it was a fantastic experience. It was a time when Apple suddenly stopped making things that looked like toys and actually created a laptop that really looked like it was a real business tool. And it was an amazing thing. The sales guy, he did a fantastic job, particularly because it was $5,400 back then to buy a laptop, which is insane, double the price of everything else in the market. And he was giving me a tour. It was great. I was feeling super happy. And then he closed it. And at that moment, I fell in love. Now, it was the craziest thing ever. What happened? When he closed it, the standby light, rather than just being a really awful static button, it pulsed. Suddenly, I'd leapt emotionally over the divide between owning a thing and then owning something that I called my baby. And from that moment on, I was a massive fan of Apple. They'd done everything right. It just absolutely resonated with me. And what I didn't know, I'd had my first experience of something that was designed using human-centered design techniques. Now, that was a pretty exciting thing for me to understand. It took me many, many years before I even got there. And since 2001, what's happened in the market? There is a plethora of exes. And on a yearly basis, there are new ones that come out. Some make sense, some don't make sense. I mean, what I've got there are just a few that I can actually explain. I'm sure there's plenty more here. Please don't ask me in the break to explain all of them, because some of them are a little dodgy. But if we look at that, it's like now we're sitting in an industry where there is such confusion about what X are we doing. Here's the two for me that absolutely and completely matter most: UX and CX. I've had so many conversations, probably in the last year, where people have said, can you tell me what the difference is between CX and UX? Or how do you describe what CX is? How do you describe what UX is? Probably 2 weeks ago, my boss calls me. He's about to walk into a meeting, and he says, do you think you could help me explain to these people the difference between CX and UX? This was a 5-minute phone call. Not enough time at all. So I think the biggest thing for us is to understand where it sits for us. And it's okay that we disagree. I think that's okay. But actually understanding what it means in our environment is probably the most important thing. So this is a mode diagram for me, and it's something that really helps me explain or even understand the difference between CX and UX. So in that very first mode, I am in the mode where I would love you to engage with me. I would love you to get me to fall in love with your product. I am in the customer experience mode. My feelings are on edge. I absolutely and completely want you to play with me, to have some fun, so that I can really understand what experience I'm after. It's a very, very visible mode. Like, it's incredibly visible, right? And so it's one of those things where, I'm constantly bombarded with a good brand and a good experience. Once I've purchased something, let me stay there. Once I've purchased something, I'm absolutely and completely in the user experience mode. I am doing the doing. At that point, I want it to be seamless. I completely and absolutely want that, from that point on, to be totally seamless. You can put a bit of delight in there, but just don't let it get in the way of the task that I'm trying to fulfill. It really does need to be completely operational. And then finally, in the responding mode. So this is the mode where, hey, I've got a complaint, or there's a problem I've got. And back in the customer experience mode again. Now, throughout this mode, you'll find that large organizations, they'll hide because they don't want you to find them so that you can complain. Now, if you're anything like me, you'll go on their Facebook page and you will find a competition or an innocuous page that has nothing at all to do with the complaint that you're about to make. But you know it's the only place that you can go where they will pay attention, because what you've done is sat on the phone for 2 hours. You've tried really, really hard for them to come back to you. You've given them every opportunity. But you'll find a place where you can broadcast your dissatisfaction. In that responding mode, you want to be satisfied. So if we run this through, devices and technology. So Apple, that was an amazing customer experience. I purchased that product because I was so in love with it. Just imagine if I'd got home and opened it, and suddenly it didn't work. The technology was too hard, everything was complex. I would have the worst dose of buyer remorse that anybody could ever come across, because I was so invested and I just expected that that next piece, the user experience of it, was going to be really good. So thankfully that didn't happen. I don't know what's happening now in 2019 with Apple. I'm beginning to fall a little bit out of love with what they're doing in their user experience space. It's a bit confusing, I think. So look at banks, financial services. This is another one where actually some of them do it fantastically well. They have the added complexity of face-to-face. They have the added complexity of storefronts. So in that customer experience space, you really want that to be beautifully consistent. You want to walk into the bank, you want to do the thing, talk to the person, and then once you've done that, if you've got the app on your phone, you're in user experience space again. You want what you're doing, that task, to be super easy. You want the ATM machines to be easy. User experience again. When you find them back again, you're a customer, it's all good, you want to get a mortgage, customer experience. You want that to be joined up and consistent. Government services. Just imagine I Google, find something, awesome Google search, jettisons me completely into the middle of the website where I need to be. No complexities whatsoever. I can find what I need, I can download what I need. It's so simple. It's not hard. Then once I'm on the page, I get what I want. That's all good. Job done. 2 weeks later, I decide I need to fulfill some task, and there's a form. The form doesn't work. I decide that in a crazy piece of madness that I'm actually going to go and stand in an office and try and talk to somebody. And 10 minutes walking, waiting, 15, 20, waiting in a line, suddenly I get to the front of the queue and I talk to a person and they can't help me at all. They give me a phone number. And then I call that phone number, 20 minutes later, I almost get what I want, but I don't quite get there. So in that instance, the user experience is fantastic. That is just amazing. But then the customer experience of that piece of connection lets it down. So Don Norman, we all know and love him. I absolutely love what he said. He said UX is all aspects of the end user's interactions. He totally understood that with organizations or companies and its products or services. So he was, user experience for him was because usability and human interface feels like it was a very narrow term. So what he wanted was something that expressed better the connection and the experience. And this to me is a perfect way of describing what CX is. Harley Manning is from Forrester, and he says CX is how customers perceive their interactions with an organization. Perceive, and perception is reality. So what matters most? I don't know what the 312 is on there for, but that's pretty interesting. Nothing to do with me. So So here for me are the 5 things that really matter. First, number 1, is please make sure that as an organization, you understand what your position is, and that as a group or as a team or as a business, you know what it is and you can talk about it in a joined up way. That's so important. And number 2, make sure that the methods, and I think lots of you guys this morning have talked about it, make sure that your methods and your processes are legitimate and robust. Incredibly important, because that is what people are asking you to do for them. To your point, Elliot, it's not to do with the name or anything, it's actually to do with the method that you're using. Number 3, please, mum and dad, don't argue in public. I have sat in meeting rooms where teams have argued or discussed the differences, people raising their eyebrows left, right, and centre. Just don't let that happen, because what you need to do is make sure at number 1, you are very clear about where you sit in the difference between UX and CX. Number 4, make sure that no customers are harmed in what you do. Please make sure that the customer gets the thing that they want by making sure that number 2 is done. You are robust and you are legit. Most importantly for me, the 5th one, learn what the combination of CX and UX can do from a consistency and superpower perspective. That is such an important thing to get right. So why is it really important that CX and UX stay married in the future? The next big thing, this is Bill Buxton, the next big thing isn't going to be a thing. The next big thing is going to be the relationship between things. Now, who do you think is going to be responsible for designing those relationships between things? It's you guys. That is going to be the job that you are doing in the future. That will be your responsibility. And so what matters more than anything else in every single way is that we're going to be at the forefront of ethical problem solving. So we're moving from doing products and services into an ethical space. And with that comes an awful lot of responsibility, and let's look at that just a little. So, car manufacturers at the moment, autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles are being taught to think. Autonomous vehicles are being run through scenarios where they're deciding who to run over. So that's a pretty scary thing to think. Please don't let technicians be the ones that are helping them do that, right? That would just be a bad idea. So the people that are helping in this space and helping cars decide, is it the older person on the pedestrian crossing, if I'm losing control, that I should run over? Who is helping make those decisions? It is people that are behavioral scientists. It is industrial designers, it's human-centered designers. So it's all of the roles that you guys are sitting now with. So we have such a responsibility in many ways to take human experience and take it into an ethical space and become the ethical problem solvers. But actually none of this matters with the 318 in the middle. I don't know where that came from. Really none of it matters. I think to the point of a lot of people this morning, it is that the person who is sitting at the end of the experience that you are designing, they don't care. They actually don't care. None of that actually matters. It only matters when you put the human in the center of the design work that you are doing. If I go all the way back to my experience with Apple, they completely understood that. If I think of some of the best services I've experienced, it's because they've totally understood that at the end, there is a human who is going to experience that service. If you're sitting across the table from a solo parent, you're interviewing them because you want to understand what services they need from a hospital. Or you're working in a co-design fashion with 7 different agencies that are trying really hard to solve the domestic abuse problem that we have in New Zealand. Do you think there is ever a point where someone's going to go, just a moment, are we doing CX or are we doing UX? They don't care. They absolutely don't care. It is our responsibility to make sure they don't care. It is our responsibility to get a really clear view of what we do as professionals in the business that we are in. Back to the original principles of human-centered design. And my slide is gone, but that's okay. There's a bit more on the bottom of the slide, and I will tell you what it says. It says, make sure that you do the right research on the right problem with the right people for the right outcome. If we do those, it doesn't matter what we call it, we can agree, as long as we agree on what we call it, it actually doesn't matter, because those things are really the most important role that we have in industry and in the business. Our job is to get that right. Our crusade, most people I know who, and I know plenty of people in the room here, a lot of you I know are in this because you are deeply passionate about what you do. You want to make an impact. You want to get out of bed in the morning and know that you've made a difference. That's such an important thing. That's a crusade in my view. And the last one for me is our points of difference are so important. Now, I think it was someone this morning said that there's real strength in finding out what our points of differences are. And for me, it is such an important thing to get to the point where we go, that's okay that we're different, but just imagine if we combine those things into one whole superpower and we actually can solve those really big, meaty problems. That is all we should be doing. So in the end, it comes down to the fact that, are we doing the right work? Are we solving the right problems for the right people? And I've just got to say one thing. It is the coolest job in the world doing what we do. It's fantastic. I would be absolutely and completely lost in another industry. And this is just the best place to be. So make sure that you understand the responsibility that comes with doing this role. So thank you.